Would you know if there was a fairy near you? Imagine there was a way we could know when fairies were around. If nothing else, knowing when a fairy is near could help us to stay safe, help us prepare for a possible encounter, or even to flee for our life. I'm Kitty, welcome to Fairy Encounters. This video is the first in a series of 4 which feature true stories of real fairies and will highlight 4 key signs that indicate a fairy is close. But before we begin, it's important to remember that fairies rarely approach us and introduce themselves. They come at us sideways, from a distance or in an unexpected form. So it's up to us to be paying attention, to keep our mind open, quiet, and cautious. So let's begin with one curious but common way that we know fairies are nearby: sensation, and 3 wildly different true experiences. The year was 1977. Ned Grimm set out for a walk into some wooded land in New York State on an overcast day. Very soon after entering the trees, he experienced an inexplicable tingling sensation in his body. Understandably, this sudden change seized his attention and he stopped to look around, only to find the countryside around him looked different. There was also a strange green tinge in the sky, and it was no longer overcast. He walked a little and came upon some grey cliffs, which he knew should not have been there. And then he heard strange sounding music. On rounding a bend, he saw a small waterfall where sat 4 little men playing pipes, while a 5th was collecting water in a jug from the waterfall. Grimm had the presence of mind to take a photo of the scene with his camera, at which point the little men disappeared. In a state of utter confusion, Grimm set off for his car and walked around for an hour or so searching for it. Then he saw his car through a cluster of trees, and the inexplicable tingling sensation rippled through his body again. He turned around to find that the strange country he had been walking through, with the clear, green-tinged sky, where he had seen the grey cliff, the waterfall and the 5 little men, and where he had heard their music, had vanished. It was gone. Grimm thought he had been gone from his car for at least 3 hours, but his watch showed it had only been 30 minutes. As for the photograph Grimm took of the 5 little men, when he took the film to be developed, he discovered that the photo of the little men was not developed. That is to say, it just didn't work. Photos taken before and after it on the roll had been developed, but not that photo. Grimm described the sensation he felt as a tingling, which sounds kind of nice actually. Certainly not painful or frightening, but still a cause for alarm, a reason enough to stop and wonder what's going on, to heighten all your senses and figure out if you're in any danger. If you're alone out in the woods and your body suddenly tingles all over, it could be a sign of an impending medical episode or signal a change to the environment around you, the air that you're breathing. And in Grimm's case, it did mark a change. The sensation which overtook his body seemed to be the result of his moving from one place to another, from one realm to another, perhaps. The sensation during the transition was a tingling, not a stabbing pain or sudden collapse or inability to breathe. It secured his attention without causing pain or fear. So perhaps whoever or whatever was in this other realm, which allowed Grimm to travel through, wanted to alert him to the change, but not alarm or harm him. Well, the next story was sent to me by John. John was visiting the Isle of Man with a friend, and they were out on a walk one day around Glen Aldlin, home of the Fenadiri. The sensation that John felt couldn't be more different from Ned Grimm's, but things are not always as they seem. I stopped to take some pictures and noticed a large mushroom ring set on the embankment. Then we noticed that the immediate area under all the trees was unusually darkened. The place suddenly had an eeriness to it. We felt as though we were being watched by something. All of a sudden there was no bird song and the air was perfectly still. Then a significant wind arose, and we heard something moving around in the dark area as twigs were cracking. We both felt uneasy, and we were still a good way off being outside of this wooded area. We kept walking and came upon this long, deserted, single-story, overgrown house. And we felt as though we had disturbed something. It just didn't feel right. Then, standing at this abandoned house, I felt a strange sensation, as if I was being told to go back. Then a sense of panic set in. I felt sick and dizzy. Head was spinning and I was feeling faint. Then, quite suddenly, there was a cold, clammy, wet feeling of something on my back. I tried not to panic. I said to my friend, "Let's go back now," trying not to alarm her too much. Then I felt an overwhelming sense of urgency that we had to go back and as quickly as possible. I was getting some sort of transmitted message, it seemed. So back we went. It seemed to take a longer time as the path stretched out like it was extending further, like the feeling when you run in a dream and barely move forward. Well, finally we got back to the steel white gates and we stopped there for breath, still feeling cold and shaken at what had just happened. My friend said to me, "Did you notice that we were in a mist all the time we were in there?" "No," I said. I told her about the sense of urgency and sickness I felt, but she was completely unaffected. I don't know what was hidden in that cloaked darkness, but whatever or whoever turned me around and prevented my trip up to Snaefell also saved me and my friend from a severe weather storm that moved in over the mountain. So maybe it was a friendly warning after all. John's experience was starkly different to Ned Grimm's. For John, the sensation he felt was at best uncomfortable and at worst frightening. At first it was his intuition telling him that something didn't feel right, a sense of unusual quiet, eeriness, heavy mist, no bird song, and subtle changes to the environment. And this was quickly followed by emotional and physical changes, feeling panic, then sick and dizzy and faint, then escalating to wet, clammy and cold, and the feeling of something being on his back. I mean, this is a series of changes which could not be ignored. It's easy to see why John was so alarmed and felt the need to get out of there as quickly as possible. Something was wrong. and it was completely out of his control. In hindsight, you could look at an experience like this as terrifying, that you were the helpless plaything of some menacing, unseen being. What at the time felt to John to be a very dangerous situation, perhaps the doing of an angry Fanadiri, was in hindsight something quite different. It was John's sense that whatever drove him from the mountain was trying to help him, even save his life. This wasn't done gently with a calm, reassuring thought transfer, but rather in very strong terms with overwhelming, unpleasant sensations. This perhaps indicated the urgency of the situation, the panic of the Fanadiri, that these two humans should leave the mountain as quickly as possible. Well, I have one last tale for you today, and this one is different altogether. Mr. Kelly was a resident of Douglas on the Isle of Man, and he shared his experience of being overcome with sensations while in the presence of fairies, and what's more, of seemingly being shepherded by them too. On a clear moonlight night, about 12 o'clock, I left Laxey, and when about 5 miles from Douglas, I heard talking and was suddenly conscious of being in the midst of an invisible throng. As this strange feeling came over me, I saw coming up the road 4 figures as real to look upon as human beings, and of medium size, though I am certain they were not human. When these 4, who seemed to be connected with the invisible throng, came out of the Garwick Road and into the main road, I passed into a by-road leading down to a very peaceful glen called Garwick Glen, and I still had the same feeling that invisible beings were with me. And this continued for a mile or more. There was no fear or emotion or excitement, but perfect calm on my part. I followed the by-road, and when I began to mount a hill, there was a sudden and strange quietness, and a sense of isolation came over me, as though the joy and peace of my life had departed with the invisible throng. Kelly's statement that the joy and peace of my life had departed with the invisible throng reminds me so much of the Dementors in the Harry Potter novels. In Kelly's experience, I get the sense that Kelly felt he lost joy and peace in his life because they had gone, not that they had taken it from him. I'm sorry for Kelly to have felt that way, but for us, it's oddly reassuring that to have been in their company was so beautiful and peaceful that to then be without them was devastating. I wonder if the fairies who accompanied or gently shepherded Kelly down that by-road were keeping him from harm's way. So there are 3 wildly different experiences of sensing the fairies. Join me next time to discover how our sense of smell can indicate that fairies are nearby. If you enjoyed this video, I think you'll love the one on screen now. Just click, sit back and enjoy. Until next time, stay curious and be kind. Cheerio!